So I'm going to introduce James Satterfield. We have had a long-term relationship with Jim. He has been in crisis communication for many, many years, and he has helped out many of our members in the midst of a crisis, and has really a lot of those members that have had crises to be able to help with were law enforcement. So a great deal of expertise in doing that. Jim, take it away.
Well, thanks for letting me be here today. And by the way, you do a great job putting everybody at ease with your comments and statements as we move along. We're focusing today on law enforcement and crisis communications. And as Dan thanked someone a while ago, let me thank you for all of the jobs that you do. It's great to live in a country where you have people who run toward the gunfire, people who help the citizens and make a big difference, and it makes a significant change. Unfortunately, we get involved with shootings on a regular basis, and I would like to be able to drop the regular basis portion of that statement. And I did the crisis management at Virginia Tech a number of years ago at the shooting there, and I talk about what those types of things mean. So we're seeing an increase in crisis events across all sectors in the government area. And I spoke last month to 80 mayors in Georgia, and I was impressed that one of them at the table said that crisis was their business because they're trying to bring people together, resolve those types of situations. And I put up the picture you see now, and I asked them what immediately comes to their mind, and they said, we're in trouble. And when you see those cameras and you see those microphones, that's certainly a signal that something is going wrong and there's been some issues that have been involved. Our agenda, we're going to talk about local government and community survey we did just last week, looking at some of the issues that they were focusing on. We'll talk about the crisis environment. We'll go through some terminology. Some of that may be new information to you. We'll explore crisis traps, some tips, and the crisis ABCs. And our focus is always on what are the decisions you need to make, what are the actions you need to take, and what are the words you need to say. And today we're really going to be more of a word emphasis since we're focused on communications. We'll give you some tools that will help you under crisis communications. And then I'm going to share with you a series of new things that are available to you under the Crisis Coach program. It's training courses and tools and services that are there. And unfortunately, they don't cost you any more money. So free is our best price. We rarely pay people to take our advice in coming in. And all of this comes together under a predict, plan, perform methodology. Predict what's about to happen, make a plan to deal with it, and then execute that plan. So it goes beyond just preparedness. It's being ready for each of those. So I want to share with you now the first question down from that survey that I mentioned. That are you concerned that the election will affect the level of violence in your organization or community? Of all the respondents, 70% said, yeah, we are concerned about that. 30% weren't very concerned. Be interesting for you to think about your county, your town. What are you seeing in the local area? We certainly have seen an increase in active demonstrations and potential violence. The second question was a little startling. Have you surveyed your stakeholders within the last year on their concerns related to the risk of violence in your workplace? And 80% said, no, we haven't done that at all. Remember, 70% were concerned about it, but 80% said we really haven't done anything on it. And we said, well, what precautions have you taken? What procedures have you put into place? And these are just some of the sample answers that I pulled out. I highlighted two in yellow just because it's interesting. They're looking at you, the local law enforcement area, and increasing the police presence as key attributes of it. On a parallel basis with all of this, California issued a law called 553 that now mandates workplace violence plans in the workplace across the board. 27 other states have started similar programs. New York is just rolling out there. So I think you're going to see much larger increase in the market as a result of what's coming through. So I want to, these are just a variety of things. I didn't have buses up here. We have a lot of bus accidents, and anytime you're dealing with the death of a student, that's a significant occurrence. But these are just some recent examples that we involved with. My interesting one there, the second item about cannibalism, was the president of the university who called us and said, we have cannibalism on our campus and we're going to hold a press conference at 5. And I explained to him, no, sir, we're not going to hold a press conference and be called Cannibal U. So it begins with a loss of control. Think about a dandelion. You get one in your yard, you're going to get another and another and another. It could be in your next door neighbors, and it's going to come over. And that spreads, and the same thing happens with crisis. A crisis is not business as usual, it's business unusual. Most cities and counties have great plans to deliver services and support all the way through, but occasionally, if it's something out of line, that's where they're thrown a curve. So crisis is a state of being categorized by loss of control, because if you're in control, you're not in a crisis, and extensive negative stakeholder. You're going to hear us talk several times today about stakeholders. And that's your citizens, your community, the media, the press, your organization, everybody that works with your government entity. Those have key stakeholders and roles that they play. And that definition of crisis is probably different. And we'll give you some of the other related terms to think about. But in a crisis environment, it's unpredictable. It thrives on a lack of structure because the normal things aren't working. There's going to be a lot of scrutiny on brand and reputation. When you get the phone call from the media, they're not here today to say we're going to be friendly. They have their own agenda to push through, and the consequences start to flow very quickly. Command and control is lost, and hostile agents. There are other people that are involved that have their own agenda. How can we use this crisis to force some other things happen? And it puts the leadership in a reactionary mode. So I want to get you a couple of background terms to be comfortable, and that's your critical assets. What are those? Your employees, the public, the citizens within your town, all of those, the brand, the reputation, and finance. So we're focused on what are our critical assets. And then there's a threat. A threat is any person or thing that has the potential to harm one of those critical assets. And I had written this before the hurricane, and so it really worked out as the hurricane came through. Hopefully you did well in your area. I'm down at St. Simons, and we lost electricity for 4 days. And you forget how much I grew up in Atlanta, and when I was growing up, we didn't have air conditioning in our house. And so it brought me back to those days, and it's not fun. But the tension built, and people became upset when you take away what they normally expect and use in those areas. So a vulnerability is a weakness or a gap in your ability to recognize and respond to the threat. Untrained employee does the wrong thing, the employee holds the door open, that's tailgating, bringing someone into the property. So what's the vulnerability that can come into play? The risk is a potential loss or damage to a critical asset caused by a vulnerability being exploited, and it becomes a threat. Swim in the ocean, riptide. An employee with a performance review, they could react negatively. It's not unusual for us to see a violence event coming from a termination within an organization. The event is when the damage anticipated by the threat actually occurs. The tornado causes the damage. The disgruntled employee shoots the boss. A disaster is when the event and disruption occurs over a short or long period of time that causes great damage to critical assets across a wide range of things. And so that's an example of each one. Now, remember, today we're really trying to focus on a crisis. So an emergency isn't that much. To a fireman, a fire isn't an emergency. It's something they handle. An armed intruder, a bomb threat, a gas leak that requires immediate response to prevent critical assets being harmed. Now, crisis, this is the statement I read you earlier, just on a different page, is a state of being categorized by loss of control. I want you to think about and focus on that word, those words, loss of control. Because if you're in control, if your plan is working, if your people are doing what you need them to do, you're in control, and the damage will be mitigated greatly as a result of that. And extensive negative stakeholder reaction. If the people who live in your community are upset, you're going to hear about it. You're going to know, and you're going to become the target for them to release their concerns and hostility associated with it. So let's do a little comparison here between an emergency and a crisis. A building's on fire and people are inside. Immediate reaction is required. The building caught fire. The smoke detector had sounded. It was an orderly evacuation. People are safe. The fire department puts out the fire. The damage is minimal. Is it an emergency? Yes. Is it a crisis? No. But if you change a couple of facts associated with it, it could immediately morph into a crisis. After the fire, you learned that there were reports that the alarms were faulty, that the building was not up to code. The victims and other employees learn of this and become angry and blame leadership. And by the way, the attorneys suddenly get involved, stirs the pot even more. Media and investigation regulators and lawyers all become involved. Leadership doesn't know what to do or what to say. Control is lost. Brand and reputation are harmed. Now you have a crisis. Yes, we've reached to it. One of the things we want to do with everything we're talking about is how do we take this and convert it into a manageable event, and what do we need to say through the process? Now, crisis traps. We want to start with what you want to be on the lookout for in this process. And the first one of those is surprise. When was the last time a surprise was good? I tell everybody the last time a surprise was good for me, I was 5 years old and it was my birthday. You get a surprise at work. If you get something coming out, in all likelihood, that surprise is going to be a concern. Everything you learn initially in a crisis is wrong. The facts change, and if you're explaining, you're losing. We're going to repeat that sentence several times before we finish today, and I'd like to register into your brain. If you find yourself trying to explain why this happened or why you couldn't prevent it, you're talking about the wrong thing. You're talking about the problem. The only thing we want to talk about is the solution. So if you're explaining, you're losing. And social media plays such a great role today in everything that we do. Now, a crisis trap is the media. First of all, the media is not your friend. I'll end up talking with a sheriff or a chief of police or a mayor, and they go, well, I know the people who own the radio and the newspaper. It's not going to be a problem. And so you have to be careful in responding to every request and making statements because they know something you don't know. And it's better to be seen as maybe being late and getting back to them instead of trying to walk into that area. The little note on the right side of the screen is actually straight out of the normal playbook from the reporter. This is James Smith with ABC. I understand your organization is in a lawsuit regarding excessive use of force, is accused of harming people. We're reaching out to you for a statement. If we don't hear from you by 3 p.m., we will publish the story we have. We see this almost every day someplace in America, that the media is using the thread of the story to try to force someone to talk. And it's better to come back in an orderly manner with information. If you get an open records request, you have time to supply it. That doesn't mean you need to drop everything today and turn it around in this area. So at the initial phone call, if you have a crisis in the works, have someone answering the phone. And when the reporter calls, say, give me your name, give me your contact information, who are you affiliated? I can't reach them right now, but I will pass the information on. And you notice that I didn't say, and they will call you back. It then tells us who we can start to monitor on social media to see what their intent is in the story, what's starting to occur. More crisis traps or press conferences. It's a visual and audible event for the media to use. They're looking for a crowd that's upset with signs. We've seen the allegations of excessive use of force. They're really looking for people that are hostile and angry, and they're pushing in those areas, And so the moment you step in front of the microphone, you're going to be the target of all of that coming together. And so keeping folks out of the limelight from those areas and keeping elected officials from going ahead to comment about the issues that you're involved in, we need to have them take a step back as this process unfolds. If we had an excessive use of force event, you need to have an investigation. It could be true, could not be true. And so the best thing you can do, and your best friend, in my opinion, in the state of Georgia, is the GBI. If you've had an allegation that something has been wrong in your department, go to the GBI and ask them to conduct an independent investigation. What that does is it frees you up. You're not then doing an investigation of your people. If you do, there'll be allegations that you're doing a cover-up. That's going to be where the media will run first on any other issue. But if you've turned it over to them and turned over all the information and you're contacted by the media, you tell them the truth. We've turned it over to the GBI. They're doing an investigation. We'll look forward to getting their report back. If you guys learn something before we do, please share it with us. It gives you time to take a deep breath, start to bring and put this back in control. Now, the mic, I have met very few elected officials who didn't love a microphone or a camera. If you can, I'd like you not to be that person out there speaking into the mic. And remember, the mic is always on. You've seen that many, many times where the person, I thought the mic was off. And no, it was recording everything at that point, and it will be played later and looking at it. So avoid that, resist the mic, don't put yourself in that area. If they come to your office, have someone else greet them, get the information, just like with a phone call, and say, I'll pass that on. They're booked right now. The interpersonal conflict also comes out in crisis communications. There was a struggle going on within the organization. If somebody didn't like somebody else, you'll see those things starting to become intensified, and they'll be using it, whatever occurred, to get support for the position that they'd taken earlier. So be aware of any interpersonal conflict that exists within your organization, because that can be an amplifier in the crisis. Town hall meetings. If I could stop every town hall meeting in America, that would be a wonderful thing, because what you've got are people that come into the audience and are very, very upset, and the media immediately turns the cameras on them, and so you see a room full of hostility, and they're blaming everybody. Facts are still being beginning, and so from that element. And generally, in coaching in this area, we tend to work and say, look, have a sign-in book. If somebody's coming to a town hall meeting, you have to have one, and they sign in, and local residents get preference, and there's a time for them to speak, 3 or 4 minutes, but it's not a Q&A. It's not a question and answer situation. The hostility will come in. They're going to be asking questions and demanding answers, but it's a chance for them to share their opinion. That's okay, and you can record that and move on. Have someone like a clerk run the meeting with a timer, and when the ding goes off, their session is over, and you move on. That area, the interchange associated with it in the town hall meetings, will exacerbate all the problems and concerns that happen. And that's good to talk about the leadership within your local government entity to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Now you multiply from that what's been going on with the other communications channels, the telephone, Facebook, email that's going out, calls, the distributions for. You've got to find the best way to communicate in the channels associated with it. If a statement needs to be issued, it's either posted on your website for your department, or it could be a Facebook page for your department. We're just very big on Facebook around. The beauty of having something posted there, you've had a chance to create your message, take a deep breath, polish it, and have it out. And if anybody wants to cite it in the media, they then are saying your words. We deal with this around the country, and that's the easiest way to give you some room to navigate. People receive news through lots of different outlets and for visibility. The more scandalous, the more controversy, the more traffic it's going to be, it increases the advertising revenue. Now, you may or may not remember Walter Cronkite. Think about him as a feature of credibility in the media. Today's media is not that. It's about advertising. Can I sell more ads in my newspaper, on my radio station, on my TV, and driving that cycle? So they're looking for controversy in that particular environment. It's not yesterday's media. Now, tips. Every crisis is a human crisis. That sounds simple to say, but I need you to think about that. People are involved. If it's an arrest or a death or excessive use of force, they're relatives, they're neighbors. It could be a racial orientation or a religious orientation. So in every crisis, look at the people that are involved, identify who the stakeholders are, and then what we're going to be doing is focusing on our decisions, actions, and words to drive our response in each of these areas. But it is a human crisis. It's just not going to go away. Somebody's not going to back off on it. It becomes their driving statement. You're going to get asked questions. Here's a set that almost always comes up. They don't always go in the nice, pretty little order that's here. People want to know what's occurred, what's known, what's going to happen next, what are you concerned about, what's your plan, what should be monitored, what are the metrics, how do we know if we're doing a good job or not, what are our key messages? And we'll give you a whole program around message maps in just a few minutes to help you develop those key messages. Who is the spokesperson? Now, a lot of you may have a PIO in the job, and normally they're used as a public information officer, getting out a lot of the information. In a crisis, we don't want to be releasing a lot of things because we haven't documented it yet. We're not confident in each of the areas. And the training that that person has had to be able to deal with the media and not to push out too much information. What are your threats, risks, and vulnerabilities? What are we most concerned that somebody's going to be talking to us about? Who are the internal and external stakeholders? Who are the internal and external attackers? Who is going to be trying to create this as a problem for their own area? What are their agendas? Is engagement by legal counsel needed? Let me answer that question for you first. Yes. The quicker you get legal and counseled, and so you have the potential for attorney-client privilege, the better. And that's one of the wonderful things about programs with GMA and ACCG. Their opportunity to tie you with legal counsel to get that. Your city or county attorney would also be helpful. And that becomes an important aspect of it. And you've got to also think about records retention. Putting things in writing can become a problem. So think about all of these things as we're coming up. And we haven't even gotten ready for what we're trying to say, but these are the questions that are going to be coming through. Now, this is about the crisis ABCs, and it's a term we worked up a number of years ago. It gives us a uniform way to talk about what's going on. People are going to be angry. What are they angry about? People are going to be blaming you. What are they blaming you for? People are going to be concerned, and concern is about what will happen next. Anger and blame look to the past. Concern looks to the future. So one of the first things in any crisis event, focus on why are people angry? What are they blaming us for? What are they concerned about as we're looking forward? Now that's the reaction. And we measure the extent of that by the spread, the speed, and the setting. How many people are aware of it? Is it increasing in speed? And the setting. Are you the lead story on CNN or are you in the school newspaper? Two different extremes in the same area. So the reaction extent becomes very important in determining those things. Now the crisis ABCs can be plotted, and we have tools that will help you do this and your people. And if you've gone through the crisis coordinator training, you know about this, but these tools are directly available to you so that you measure Along the vertical axis, the anger, blame, and concern, the intensity, and along the horizontal, the extent, the spread, the speed, and the setting. And where that falls, if it's in the lower area, that's guarded. If it's in the middle area, that's yellow, it's elevated. It's in the red at the top, it's severe. And that's going to determine what we're going to do and how we focus on it. And so if it's in that low level, we're going to monitor developments before we move forward. We're not going to talk about it. It's not a problem. The anger, blame, and concern are within control. It's not running rampant. So we're basically going to sit back and monitor. If it's in the elevated area, our goal here is to manage our response in coming through. What are we trying to do dealing with that particular crisis? If it's severe, then our goal is to mitigate. And this is where leadership needs to be involved at every step along the way. That's the administrative side, the services and operations of your organization, in addition to what you're doing from a law enforcement standpoint. But it gives us a common base on how to manage what we're attempting to do at every step. Now, I talked about decisions and actions and words, and we could do a whole webinar and training around it. But first thing you need to focus on, well, what are the decisions you need to make? In a crisis, what happens most of the time, people jump immediately into action. And in this area, we need to slow down first and figure out what decisions do we need to make. Do we need to close the road? Do we need to take control of certain other things? And we've got to be that based upon facts, not opinions or suppositions. So what are the decisions? We were involved in a situation that happened in a town, and this was in the fall, and they were saying, we have to handle this for the 4th of July celebration. We don't need to make that decision today. It's not the 4th of July. We have plenty of time. And so it puts in perspective by focusing on what are the decisions we must need to make. Actions in, what are we trying to do? And look at the detail to establish command and control. We're not trying to make everything go. We need to be in control at this point. That's our key action. How does this put us in control of what's going on? And then finally, the word choices matter. If you say the right words, it makes a difference. And the number of times that someone would come and say, nobody would ever say that. Yep, that's exactly what they said. Created the problem around it. So focus on it, breaking it down, and that slows it down a little bit more so that you're in control of what's going on. What decisions do we need to make? What actions do we need to take? And what words do we need to say? Now, crafting this and I remember I told you earlier, you're going to see this statement over and over. Explaining is losing. You're not going to be able to explain your way out of anything associated with it. We want to talk about the solution. We do not want to talk about why it occurred and timing it. Now, particularly, you have some more time than you think. There is not an immediate urgency that you have to make a statement today to the media. In fact, I would encourage you to wait as long as possible to make those. Now, we have a test of why 5 times. Somebody comes to you and says, we've got to get ahead of this thing and put out a message. I'd like you to say, why? And they'll give you an answer. And you know what? It'll be a pretty good answer. And then you go, why? And they'll think about it and they'll give you an answer. It's not quite as good as the first one, but it's okay. Then you say, why? And then they're like a little bit dumbfounded. And if it continues on, go the 4th time and ask why. If you go to 5 whys in a row and they give you good answers, you better be out talking about it right now. But most of the time, that urgency can be delayed until all the facts are in, all the information, and everybody is aware. So you've got to weigh the value of the communications against the potential exposure or liability created. How many times have you heard somebody say, we didn't know anything about it? Yeah, you did. We didn't do anything wrong. Yeah, you did. And it keeps getting worse and worse when you make those definitive statements early based on what you think or what you hope, and that puts you in difficulty. So use the test of why 5 times. Just when somebody says, we need to write a press release. Why? and that will put you in control to pull it back together. Now, I want you to have home bases and message maps. A home base is where you go if there's been a problem. We're going to go back to our home bases. Dan was leading us in before the call was on, and we had people supporting the University of Georgia. People know what to say at the University of Georgia about the team and about what's going on. And so the home bases are your base statements that you can always go to, and they're ready in advance. And I'll share that with you in the next slide and give you a couple of quick examples. And message maps are around particular concerns so that they control your response on that single issue. They're well thought out statements and they're safe responses. You probably have a mission statement or a vision for your department or your town. So if take a look at what that mission statement is, and it gives you a chance to say, you know, that's what defines us. We're here to create a safe environment to raise a family and earn a living. That's what our town's all about. That's our mission. This event won't define us. That's what defines us. The second one is we're committed to continuous improvement. We're going to make sure that this never happens again. And third, we want to embrace the family that are involved and support to everyone that's there. That's much better than no comment. It's much better than making a statement that we didn't do anything wrong. So what defines our organization? We're going to invent the future, and we're going to embrace the victim and the family. Those are safe things that you can say. It sounds significantly better than no comment. We're not going to let this event define us. This is what defines us in our town. We're going to invent the future to make sure it never happens again. But right now, our hearts and prayers are with, and it pushes it from that statement. Those statements work, and they allow you to continue to move forward and buy time. Now, message maps are to focus on particular issues. If you are presented with a problem, you write down that question or concern, you identify what the impact would be, and what your first answer, your second answer, and your third, and how you would deliver it. Posted on the website? Is it an email? Is it a verbal response? But you'll notice here, you know what the impacts you're concerned about, and it says first message. You give that first message. This is very technical, and then you shut up. They follow up on that same one, then you give the second message, and then you shut up. And if they do it again, you go to the third, and then you shut up at the end. And then you go back to those home bases after that. You don't want to choose all of your answers and putting it out. But if you're on the call today, you probably came on the call because you were feeling, hey, I want to be ready if we have something that occurs. Think about whatever that issue that you're concerned about. Is it hiring? Is it training? Is it excessive use of force? What's going on? You could write your messages out and be ready so you'd have the right words at the right time to respond to those events. The media will always be looking for a controversial story. I already told you, if it bleeds, it leads. They want to deal with those areas. Not get into an interview position. If they're calling and said, communicate directly with state via email. We can't meet today. Please, if you'll share your questions, we'll try to get back in touch with you. But you're trying to delay this because it's another thing that time will be on your factor. The media is trying to create the tension of their time pressure and make that your problem, not their problem. If you have to talk to the media, use your home bases and message maps. No comment versus, as I'm sure you can appreciate, we cannot communicate details about an ongoing investigation. That's much better than no comment. You're giving them credit, but assuming they can do that. Tell them, what I can tell you about this is, whatever that is that you can say, now that starts to bridge a relationship between you and the person to pull that one. And the last one is extremely important, state facts only. Now, in my opinion, we didn't do anything. I don't want to hear about your opinion. I don't want to hear about I think, I believe, I assume. Those are wrong. If you know something is a fact, you can communicate the fact, but not an opinion. that will come back and create a significant problem from you. Now, you've got to continue to monitor all of it. That little chart that you see there in the balloon that's set up, is this problem going up? Is it staying the same? Is it declining? That will help, and share that with everybody on your team so that they're all coming from the same area. If you know why people are angry, why are they blaming you, and what they're concerned about, now that will go in crafting our messages and how we communicate better. What to prioritize in a crisis? Well, the first one's pretty obvious. People come first. They want to know what's going to happen. Think about those people in North Carolina that are going in. We lost electricity here for 4 days. That was pretty important to us to get those things back up and running. If you can do an independent investigation, I did a positive statement at the very beginning about the GBI. That's great. If you do the investigation of your department, of your office, then it's going to be suspect because they think you're going to do a cover-up. So you need to preserve all witnesses and evidence. Get legal counsel involved as early as you can. The pools in the state of Georgia have excellent outside attorneys that can work with whoever you already have as a city or a county attorney to make sure those media's elements are handled correctly. Having that privilege that they could be on the call because you're having the call in contemplation of litigation, that's going to make a significant difference. Now, there's a ton of information out on social media. If you go to Google, it'll teach you how to set up a recurring search to find any story that's coming out over the internet related to your location, your department, or the problem that you're experiencing it. That'll give you information of what's happening and what is being said in each of these areas. So believe that what you learn is true and consider the information is true until you learn it's not. But remember, the first thing I said today is that most everything you learn initially is wrong. And you're going to be faced with that in this area. But we can't wait till we have perfect knowledge. We have to move along. If you send a note or leave a voicemail or send a text or an email, that's going to become public knowledge. It's going to be sent and you'll have to come back. Expect that there's going to be blame, anger, and concern over every single circumstance that happens. Appreciate that this is going to escalate, but there can be positive outcomes, particularly if you put this into place. Now, if you think about crisis, there are 4 crisis event stages. Before, that's when we need to put a plan in place and training like we're having our conversation today. So we're before. There are tools that I'm going to give you here in just a few minutes that will allow you to go into more detail and build that through. Second is imminent. It hasn't happened yet, but you think something's going to occur. What can we do to prevent it? 50% of the whole thing about a crisis is before it actually happens, because you can either prevent it or mitigate it by taking steps early on. The during, it's going on right now. And remember, when we focus on during, we're looking at our decisions, actions, and words, but we're doing that with an area of getting control. If we're back in control, we are no longer in a crisis. And then after, how do we return to a normal, restore that new control after the event? So when you think about crisis, it's not one thing, it's 4. Is it before? So we're trying to get ready. Is it imminent? Is there something we can do to prevent it? Is there doing? How do we get back in control? And then after, how we recover into those areas. Now, there is a course that I'm going to give you a way that you can attend that you can share to all employees in your department, in your county, or your account that can learn about crisis. And it takes about 10 minutes. It's an e-learning program that just frames some of this information for them. And I'll give you a link to that in just a couple of minutes. But it's about 10 minutes, and it lets everybody then have an appreciation of what you're talking about. Now, we've been doing a program for a couple of years in Georgia with a crisis coordinator. A crisis coordinator is somebody whose responsibility is to recognize that something requires more information, identify enough information to see if that's going to escalate, and then alert leadership of what's going on so they can do it. So the crisis coordinators have done a great job of taking the surprise out of crisis. This is a 12-module course, and if you go through it, it takes about 2.5 hours, and you get a certification coming from it. There is a new program that we're just rolling out in Georgia called Certified Crisis Advisor. Their role is a step above the coordinator. They're really focused on understanding what's occurred, all the components, the circumstances, the impacts. They then advise leadership on what they needed to do and focus through those, and then finally support leadership while they're dealing with those events. Leadership will be stressed in any crisis. The advisor's role is to help completely in those areas. And then there's another tool. Those three things were training, the awareness, the crisis coordinator, and the crisis advisor. The VCRA is a tool. You log into it, and it follows a 1, 2, 3 process. First thing it's going to say, what stage are you in? Are you before, imminent, during, or after? And what are you concerned about? I'm concerned about excessive use of force. Great. Now then, the VCRA will push to you control, checklist, information. What are the first things you need to do? What are the things you can say? And put that together. And so it empowers you to focus on your decisions, actions, and words. And again, like the training, this is available to you at no cost. So here is an example of a checklist on use of force considered excessive. The guidance that they come back in, most reports are wrong. There will be video that will emerge. Look at the individuals involved in a previous use of force. Expect individual media to show up at the monthly or town hall meetings. It's about money. Ultimately, a payment's going to be made. So that's some general guidance. And then there's 2 checklists. This is the first one when you first learn on it, and you see pointing again toward the investigation. Notifying your insurance pool, your insurance carrier immediately. Inform local leadership not to discuss. We don't need them making statements. We've always had a problem. That's not going to be helpful. And identify the victims. By the more that we can do to help anybody that's involved, medical expenses, funeral counseling, it reduces the extent of the problem. The second group is when the public responds to the use of force incidents, and you're starting to get investigations, protests, and statements, the need for investigation, how to handle the protests, statements verifying so you can figure out what are you doing and who it's been assigned to and carrying it along. And so all of this is located on a website that gives you access to it. And the first page that you come to, it says bad things happen to your members, and for insurance pools like your pool. And there's a little video over to the side that takes 1 minute and 41 seconds, and it just gives you an overview of Crisis Coach. At the bottom, it talks about the crisis awareness, that training for all the employees, the certified crisis coordinator, the certified crisis advisor, and the VCRA. These little short videos just are explaining what they are. So if you have somebody back where you work and they need to know more about it, you can share those links. They can immediately see, yep, that's what we're doing, and the value that comes with it. So now to get to take those things, then this piece of paper that you see on the right side there gives you a link. The overview, those things that I just showed you, you can go to coach.crisisrisk.com, and it's set up for just Georgia, that you would be able to see those little videos and get a description of what's involved. If you or your people want to take one of those 3 courses, awareness, coordinator, or advisor, then you go to certified.crisisrisk.com. And if you want to use the VCRA, the Virtual Crisis Response Advisor, then the instructions are at instructions@vcra.com. Or if you're going to use it, you would go to vcra.com, and the authentication code that you'll be asked for will be GA certified. This is all proprietary information. This is a program that your pools have worked on in Georgia to have access for you all in one spot so that you can go there and get this assistance. It works great with a phone or a tablet. You can hit that QR code and it'll take you directly there. You can type in the others. And Dan will probably be sending out that page to everyone so that you'll have it, so you don't have to be writing furiously. Put it down. Now, I wanted to show you one more thing. This is a crisis Miranda warning, different than the Miranda warning you in law enforcement are giving. You have the right to remain silent. You know what? That's the same. Anything you can and will, you say can and will be used against you in the court of public opinion. Different court here, but that's exactly what happens. You have the right to a crisis manager. If you cannot afford a crisis manager, Crisis Risk/Firestorm, those are our company. We'll provide one for you, but we generally get a phone call, Dan or someone else saying, could you speak to these folks? And then lastly, do you understand the rights as I just read to you? With these rights in mind, do you wish to speak to a crisis code? Now, if you're explaining, you're we mentioned that at the very beginning, and I want to end that. Hopefully you've learned enough of how to approach this and what to think about that will be helpful today. So we've covered a lot of ground, and we've been talking about crisis being defined by a loss of control. That's probably a new thought to you to think about. So Dan, if there's a question, we'll try to answer it. If everybody's fallen asleep, I'll try to be louder next time and keep everyone awake. Dan, do we have any questions or comments?
James, thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody want to say anything? Well, James, you must have filled them full of information. So much information. You have answered all questions in advance.
I put them to sleep. That's all it was.
We got an excellent job. We got to thank you. This was very insightful. Thank you. The compliments keep coming in. So as Jim had said, we did record this. I'll be sending out this along with some additional information to all those that registered for this particular event. We did have a lot of people interested in it. If in the future you do have an issue with a crisis and you need information, definitely, if you're a GIRMA member with GMA or an IRMA member with ACCG, or even a work comp member with either of those, and you have a crisis in your situation, you have some assistance, please reach out and we'll be able to get you in contact with Jim in the future. But thank you, Jim. I really appreciate it. Thank you, all of you, especially those in law enforcement, for everything you do every day. We really do appreciate your sacrifice and the work that you do. So Jim, any last comments?
No, we do, and I really emphasize that. It's great to live where people run toward the gunfire. People are dealing with keeping people safe and protecting them in every aspect. We thank you for the job you do. We're delighted to have you here. We're a phone call or an email away. Just let us know. We're here to help. But crisis is defined by a loss of control. Our job is to get you back in control of these events. Have a great day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.